Hey guys, I'm feeling nice and toasty. I hope you guys are too. I'm warm here in the kitchen because I'm cooking up a whole load of winter warmers just for you. So here are my Wok Wednesday winter warmers. For this week, we've got Claypot chicken and mushroom rice, one of my favorites from the streets of Hong Kong. You get these Claypot rice shops, specific restaurants, kind of like side street restaurants in Hong Kong, but there's not that many of them around anymore. And one of my favorite dishes from there is a chicken and mushroom rice. And these shiitake mushrooms, they've been soaked in hot water overnight, or minimum of sort of a couple of hours. Just cutting them in quarter. You can do them in slithers, quarters, however you want really. I'm going to marinate these mushrooms along with the chicken. I've got chicken thighs here. If you have any sort of harder stalks, just take those off. And then you can cut into them. And these Claypot restaurants, fantastic because you have these tiny little sort of gas fires dotted along the sort of front window of the restaurant. And it's one of these dishes that takes time to cook. So when you order it, you have to be prepared to wait sort of 20, 25 minutes for your Claypot rice dish to come. And they've got all different toppings. You can have sort of braised aubergine, you can have different types of cured meats, your slow cooked pork belly, your chicken like this, XO, prawns, whatever you want. They've got so many different variations. You're talking sort of tens and tens of variations. And this one's very simple, and it always comes with this great sort of quick wok cooked chili soy, which I'll show you guys how to make as well. I've got a few ingredients to chop up, which I'll use for the base of my rice, but also to make up that quick chili sauce. So I've got some ginger here. I'm going to use this ginger with a few slices to sort of fry off before I get the rice into the clay pot. And then I'll bash the rest for the quick chili sauce. So that's for the rice. And then for the chili sauce, it can be very roughly bashed. Then you can add some spring onion to the base of the rice as well, and just in chunks like this works nicely. And the rest of the spring onion, again, we'll add to that chili sauce, also in chunks. Garlic for the chili sauce. Roughly bashed, or quite sort of whole and chunky. And then your chili itself. Keep the stalk in as well. This is really rough and ready, proper sort of street food style. And that all goes into one bowl. So that's for the base of my rice, which I'm going to sort of crisp up and go golden brown with the ginger before I then cook my rice. Now last but not least, you're going to marinate the chicken. And if you marinated this overnight, it would take in more flavour, but that chili sauce really does it. And this is one of those dishes that when I cook it, even if I'm just cooking it for one person, you just can't stop eating it. It's very Moorish, and if you get the crispy sort of rice base right, that's where that Moorish texture comes in. So I'm going for sort of rough dices of chicken thigh. Thigh is definitely better than breast for this, but you know, if you want something less fatty, you can use breast too. The whole idea is that it's steamed anyway, so whatever sort of piece of meat you use, it should sort of stay nice and succulent. A couple of thighs should do it, depending on how big your clay pot is, because you don't want to sort of overpack the clay pot with meat or food. It needs to cook through properly. You can see I'm sort of thinning the piece of chicken out before slicing it into the chunks. The hard thing about this dish is getting the actual cooking right, getting that perfect crisp on the rice, on the bottom of the rice, without burning it too much. So I'm going to show you that once I finish marinating this. And the marinade is really easy. I've got a little bit of rice wine here, so Shaoxing rice wine, about a tablespoon or so. Similar amount of light soy, some sesame oil, about a teaspoon, and then a pinch of sugar, and some corn flour, which will help sort of bind that together, but also more importantly, it does help to tenderize the meat a bit, but it allows the sort of flavor and the sauce to stick to the chicken and not fall too much into the rice. You don't want the rice to be sort of gloopy. Give that a good massage through. I've kept this really simple, but if you wanted to put a bit of ginger and garlic into here as well, you could. Make sure you pick up all the marinade into the meat and the mushrooms rather than letting it sit at the base of the bowl. If your hands are clean and you've got that creamy colour, then you're ready. Now when you're cooking Claypot rice, the hard thing is knowing sort of how much water you need and also sort of how to get that sort of crispy golden brown layer of rice at the bottom of the clay pot. And so the rice itself I've washed at least 3 times. Chinese style, Chinese mums always teach you to wash your rice at least 3 times. When you're washing it, you've got to be nice and sort of gentle with it, not sort of, don't go too hard into the rice, otherwise you'll break up those grains. The next thing is, once that's washed and your water is pretty much clear, then you're going to measure out your water. It is roughly, for Claypot rice, about 1:1 water to rice. It's a little less water than if you're just doing normal steamed rice because you want it to dry out a little and crisp up on the base. But it'll fluff up from the steam and cooking it for long enough. So I've got my Claypot on a medium heat at the moment. That's going to get quite hot in a second, and I'm going to put some ginger and my spring onion in to cook through. With the rice and measurement of water, if you haven't got that sort of perfect cup size, then the sort of traditional Chinese method of measuring is that in any sort of bowl or pan, you can either place your whole hand down, and if you push down onto the rice and the water just hits the top middle knuckle of your hand, then you've got enough water, just enough water for your rice. So with your clay pot, you need a good amount of oil to start with. That's not just to crisp up the ginger and the spring onion, but also to fry the actual rice grains into. You want to swirl that around the sides of the pot because you want as much crisp around the edge of the rice as possible when you finish. Now on a medium heat, you're going to get your slices of ginger in first. And you want these bits of ginger to go nice, so golden brown, before you add anything else. Now these chunks of spring onion are not 100% necessary, but I find they add nice flavour to the oil. Woo! Dancing spring onion. As you can see, they don't take long to cook. So your rice is going to go in, and then once that rice is in, you want to sort of coat that rice in oil. Great sound that. And that's the sort of first technique to getting that crisp finish. So once all that rice is nicely coated in oil, it's just kind of like cooking like a Chinese style paella really, where you've got that nice sort of caramelized bottom of the rice grains. It's starting to stick a little, which is fine. So just lay that as flat as possible. Gently, don't push it down. And then let that cook for about 30 seconds or so before you pour the water in. When the water goes in, it will start to bubble up, and then once it's boiling through, then we're going to turn the heat right down to a low heat. You don't want to burn the rice, so my water's going to go in. This is cold water. Now once your rice is coming to boil, you just want to gently lay your marinated chicken into the rice in a sort of, as much as possible, into one layer. So once that's bubbling away nicely, then turn it right down to a low heat, and then you're going to just cover that with a lid carefully and let that cook. So that water will continue to evaporate. I've probably got way too much food in there, but hey, it's quite authentic. It's drizzling over. Feels like I'm in the streets of Hong Kong right now. And whilst that evaporates, when it gets to a point where it's sort of all the rice has absorbed that water, then you want to continue cooking it for about 10 to 15 minutes. And we'll pour a little bit of oil around the edge of the actual clay pot so that that rice gets really nice and crispy underneath. Now, depending on your hob, after about sort of 15 minutes or so, your water should have mostly evaporated. You can see there's still little sort of bubbles of liquid around the edges here. So what I'm doing is just lifting the lid off, allowing that excess sort of moisture to evaporate. And then what we want to do is we want to start to crisp up the base. You might get little bits, depending on your hob, that might be a bit more crisp than the others. But what you want is a nice crisp bottom on that rice so you can sort of dig into it, pour that soy, that chili soy over the top. Now once that rice is drying up around the edges, then you can just put a drizzle of oil around the edge like so. And run a spoon around the edges so that that oil can sit into the clay pot and crisp up the rice even more. You can hear that crisping up now. Well, you'll smell sort of the rice catching a little, and just as it's getting that sort of slightly burnt smell, that's when you want to switch it off. You can hear that crackling nicely. Okay, that there is done. You have to sort of work with your instincts, and you can see that sort of smoking on the base there, so it might be a little bit over in parts, but around the edges it should be nice and crisp and golden brown. Now this chili sauce my dad used to make all the time, and it just works perfectly with this rice dish. You need a fair bit of oil to make sure that all this stuff sort of crisps up and get a nice char as quickly as possible. Nice and hot. With ginger, garlic, spring onion, and your red chili, or any chili really, straight into the wok, and let that sizzle away. And all it takes is a bit of dark soy and some sugar, and that'll caramelize around the edge of all those great ingredients once they've had a nice char. High heat. You kind of want to blister the skin of the chili before you add any sauce. Now I've got that nice sort of blistered chili skin. All that dark soy straight in. A good amount of sugar. So you're looking about sort of 2 teaspoons or so of sugar. Bring that up to a vigorous boil. Once it's boiling all the way through that chili sauce, then it's ready. You're going to pour that straight out. So my clay pot's sort of sitting with the lid on, is still steaming away nicely, and the rice then just has that time to sort of fluff up a little. So you can see, when you dig in, you've got these nice sort of crunchy bits of rice, but the rice itself is still separate enough and should be fluffy in texture. And even by itself, with that light sort of marinade, works a treat. Now, I'm going to have a little taste of this before the guys take a photo. Let's take a bit of this chili, put that on top. Got that nice crunchy part. That is heavenly. Chinese food, all about a balance of flavour, texture and colour. And you know, if you take your chili sauce like this, the idea is in those clay pot rice restaurants, they serve this on the side, and then you just pour a load of it over the top, you know, depending on everyone's sort of eagerness to have this chili. And that just tastes delicious, so earthy. Guys, don't forget, if you want to learn these sorts of traditional recipes or new recipes all around Asian cuisine, to subscribe to our channel and like all of our social media.